we're a small group. So I'm thinking we could have a discussion more sort of as opposed to us talking to you, and uh, give you an opportunity to ask questions as we go along, maybe talk about the history of the fellowship, brief as it is, what projects have been undertaken. There are now three, and what we're thinking about going forward, and questions that you all might have, or project ideas you might have, or where you want to settle, and how we can help you make that happen. Because this is I guess I should say at the outset, this is really a program geared towards making sure the fellowship experience is successful, both for the fellow as well as for the sponsoring organization. So if you have some mobility, maybe you'll end up in Alaska, or Arkansas, as RG did, or Arizona, as Leslie did. So this is an opportunity both to learn tax law, to practice tax law as a seasoned practitioner, and also to experience sort of an LITC type environment as a seasoned practitioner. The fellowship started a couple of years ago. Tax analysts came to the tax section and asked for assistance in administering a fellowship program. And we thought about, well, what would that look like? Because we had the Christine Brunswick Fellowship Program in place, and that's the one really for recent graduates, people just out of law school or just out of their LLM program. And we thought, we know that there are people who are sort of mid-career who are thinking about shifting gears and moving into the public interest world, or maybe they've done some pro bono work, maybe they've taken cases, or they've done the calendar call, or they participated in other section activities, which are abundant, and we can talk about that at some future point. And now they're thinking they would like to do this full time, and go all in. And so we thought this would be an opportunity for that mid-career person to sort of launch them into a project that they want to pursue, and provide assistance to a population that is in need of free tax representation. So, for instance, Leslie, we'll talk a little bit more, but Leslie is in the serving a couple of tribes in northern Arizona. RG is working with extremely rural populations in Arkansas, and the current fellow is embarking on a project to serve rural folks in Montana. So you can see there's sort of a rural focus to this historically, but really the field is open. I think the issue is more, where is there a need? Are you the person to meet that need? Is there a host organization for you? And how would you define what that need is and how you would meet that need? So that's sort of a general overview. I don't know if y'all have questions about the sort of general overview part. All right, great. So we open up an application process. It is open now. I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at the application, but essentially we're asking you to talk about the project, what you want to do, and also what the qualifications are of your host organization, because we want to make sure that you're going to be supported in whatever project it is that you undertake. And Meg, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about the logistics?
Yeah, I just want to clarify for the project for our other fellowship, the Christine Brunswick Fellowship, which is meant for recent JD graduates, or people who've done like maybe a year of a clerkship. Recent is sort of vaguely defined. And sometimes people who are interested in the tax analyst fellowship do decide they might be better fit for the Brunswick Fellowship. So do consider that as well. For that fellowship, and we can talk a little bit more about it at the end. We do require a specific project, like people might focus on incarcerated taxpayers or children in the foster system. I'm using examples of recent fellows. For this one, the project is really expanding access to taxpayers that don't have access. So it's not meant to be in addition to the work that you're doing. It's meant to be part of the work that you're doing. So the project is really, how will you expand access to tax resources in an area that is currently, someone just mentioned the term LATC desert, which I really enjoy. Because I think that's actually a perfect phrase for this program. We're looking for LATC deserts, so places where there really aren't those services. The other thing that we're looking for is LATC desert population. So yes, there may be other LATCs in a particular area, but maybe there's populations within that area that aren't being reached because of their special needs, like language needs or other types of access barriers that they might face. Um, I just want to clarify that the goal here is a little bit different than our Brunswick one, where we want them to learn how to be tax lawyers and then also do something issue specific. Here, we want you to already know how to be a tax lawyer and then practice that tax law elsewhere. And so that can mean, like, Leslie was her own sort of boss. She had great experience. She'll talk to you about this later, but she had practiced tax law enough that she didn't need a direct supervisor doing the tax law. And that's fine for people who are experienced tax lawyers starting an LATC somewhere new or reviving one. That is fine for this program. It would not be fine for the Brunswick program because those folks do need supervisors because they're new. For here, if you have 5 years of experience practicing tax law, I mean, RG has Jennifer as a supervisor, which is great, but probably also, is sort of like out on his own in a different part of Arkansas, and he doesn't need that kind of supervision. So that's sort of the difference between the two fellowships. And it also sort of speaks about the logistics as well, right? So for the Brunswick Fellowship, we would look for the fellows to be, hold on, I'm just gonna would look for someone to be physically close to their supervisor. We want to know a lot more about what is the day-to-day logistics going to look like between the fellow and the supervisor. How often will they have supervision meetings, things like that. For this, we're much more flexible. This is much more open because we're looking for people who can be more independent in their practice of law, and they might have a supervisor, like RG has a supervisor, and they do have meetings and they do, cover clients' cases together. But we're really open to a lot of different things. We're open to someone starting a new LATC in the right setting. One of our current tax analyst fellows is based out of Colorado, which is not an LATC desert, but is expanding services to Montana, which is. And they had a structure for doing that already. So she has a supervisor, but is, also doing stuff on her own in Montana. So these are all examples. There's a million more examples out there, but I think in your application, you want to focus on explaining to us or to the folks that are deciding on candidates, what would the logistics look like so that we can envision what your fellowship might be like. So where would you be living? What would your relationship with your host organization look like? Are they just someone you approached and they're willing to host you and maybe it's going to be okay? Or is it someone who already has an LATC? And if so, how would your presence add to that? And because these are so situation specific, I highly recommend people reach out to me to walk through what their logistics would look like. I've done that with any of the successful candidates. I've talked to all of them before they've applied. So there's a lot of really issue specific things, and I think I have a good handle on what the selectors are looking for. And I'm happy to talk you through that. You would then work for your host organization. Even if you don't have a direct supervisor, they're still you're an
Employer.
employee. Yeah, they're your employer and
Right.
you are their employee. So Ty will talk more about how the money works for that. But for example, vacation time, I don't know, retirement benefits, if there's a union in the legal services organization or something like that, if you had medical leave, any of those things fall under the rules for other employees of your host organization. So we are not going to tell you how much vacation time you're going to get. They're going to tell you. So you should direct any of those questions about sort of where you sit, what does your equipment look like,
Library
do
access.
they cover your cell phone bill? A
Yeah.
library access, research access. That's great. A great example. Like will you have access to Westlaw or what have you? All of those questions should be covered with your potential host organization before you apply. Because if there's a deal breaker for you and you don't find that out till after, that's not good. You should make sure that you're happy with all of that stuff before you apply. We will reimburse that organization, and Ty can talk about it later for the salary, but you are an employee of them.
The other,
Um,
I was going to say, Meg, the other facet of this fellowship, which is unique to this fellowship, is the opportunity to work with tax analysts, the publication, on getting something published. And so, unlike sort of the newer lawyers who may be involved in the Brunswick Fellowship, this one, because it's for the more mature or seasoned lawyer, presumes a different kind of curiosity about tax issues, one that would prompt you to explore an issue more fully and write about it, get mentored in writing it, and hopefully get it published as well. So there's sort of two objectives with this. One is sort of the experiential objective of working in providing low-income services to low-income taxpayers, and the other objective is working on a piece that can be publishable.
And
So.
you'll find if you look, and we can share, happy to share, Leslie co-authored and authored a number of articles about working with the indigenous population in Arizona with tax analysts, which was great. And it was so awesome to see posted on social media. And she's famous now, basically, and brought a lot of awareness to the issue, which is really important. It just wasn't something that was written about a lot, so it's great. And then RG is working on what he's going to be discussing in his writing, and I feel confident that he will also get a nice platform for discussing issues facing rural taxpayers in Arkansas or whatever else he wants to cover. So
So
that is a
this is a
great point,
real
Susan.
Yeah, this is a real sort of career opportunity. So it's not
Yeah.
just sort of a job along the way, but it's really a career opportunity, not just to get the job experience, but also to get out there, as Leslie has by getting published, and getting acknowledgement for that. And perhaps, once the fellowship is done, your host organization picks you up, or another organization says, we read that article you wrote. We were so intrigued. We'd like to offer you a job. So there you can see that this is sort of aiming at a different population than the just graduated from law school population.
That's right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the timeline. We've done different things with the timeline of this. We're looking for a very specific type of individual in a very specific set of circumstances, and we know that. And so as a result, we're willing, it's different than our other fellowship again, where we really want to make sure that the wonderful resources that we're so fortunate that Tax Analysts has provided for this fellowship, we want to make sure that they're being used for exactly what we meant for them to be used for, right? And so we are willing to wait a little bit. So if you're thinking about applying, but you haven't found your host organization yet, or you want to apply, but you just aren't going to be able to meet the deadline, let me know because it is a flexible deadline. We've done rolling deadlines before, and that just confuses people a little bit, I think. So this year we have a June 30th deadline, as in we'd like people to submit by June 30th. And if we get a solid candidate by then, we will move forward with them. So if you're considering applying and you aren't going to make the June 30th deadline, please let me know as soon as possible because I will keep that in mind as we're reviewing other folks and I'll check in with you about how close are we. And if it's because you haven't found your host organization yet, then you definitely want to check in with me because I can help put you in touch with potential host organizations that might be a good fit. So that's the timeline. It's sort of a little fluid, but the June 30th deadline is what we're shooting for, and you should know that other people might really target that June 30th deadline, so you don't want the chance to miss you by if you're a great candidate. So and then we will interview candidates that seem like they could be a good fit in July. And if you need us to go faster or slower, well, maybe faster, just let us know. We can, try to front end those interviews. July is obviously a hard month for a lot of people with holidays and vacations, and we have a leadership conference and things like that. So we will be happy to rush your interview if you do have other opportunities, or if you're thinking about moving and you need more time with the start date, our ideal situation is sort of in that like Labor Day time period. That's when our Brunswick fellows start. They start usually the next work day after Labor Day or somewhere in that vicinity. We're also flexible with that. I think some of our fellows, and I know I can't remember who, maybe Heather, our current fellow, started, a couple months later even. You start in October, that's fine. You start in like April, that's not really fine, right? So we're looking for something close-ish to September. Ty can talk about the financial. It makes Ty's life easier. We'll just put it that way. So somewhere in that like September time period. All right, Susan, I'll hand it back to you.
Oh, I was going to say, that being said, what we learned in dealing with tax analysts and also with the applicants and the projects and so forth is that the emphasis really is on the applicant and the host organization and what you want to do, as opposed to meeting a deadline.
Yeah.
So, just to reinforce what Meg said, if you can't meet that June 30th deadline, please let Meg know, so that we can help you get over the finish line, if that's what it's going to take, to make a successful application for you. Um, I think, I don't know if there are potential hosts, in our audience. I know Lisa
Well, let's
mentioned that.
cover everything because I think a lot of people are going to watch the recording.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm wondering if we want to turn to Ty to talk a little bit about the logistics of hosting a fellow.
Certainly. Hello, folks. So in the theme of deserts and such, I'll say I am the water quartermaster, and that's why water can be supplied at different times of year. It doesn't have to be at a deadline, but you can imagine we can't supply twice as much water at one time, so it does need to flow. And how that works, I have a couple of visual aids, and that is with a sample commitment letter. Hopefully that now comes up. And so what the section will provide is a quarterly contribution to the host organization that covers salary, which as of today is 20,000 per quarter, 80,000 per year, plus FICA and what I would call health and welfare benefits. That maximum contribution to the host organization cannot exceed 25,000. However, if the host organization can cover any additional costs, it doesn't mean that things are locked in to 25,000 or less. It's just that 25,000 is what the fellowship will provide per quarter. Let's be clear, per quarter. And that's generally done on the first of the month of whichever start date per month. And so what you'll provide is the second visual aid is a worksheet to the host organization. If I can find it. Just a sec. You'll provide a worksheet to the host organization such that it describes your medical and other benefits. And then they will, here we go. So medical insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, etc. That sums to the total quarterly contribution to the host organization. As of today, we do not adjust based on location. That's something I know that is often a question. So if you're in Arizona or New York City, which you wouldn't be in New York City, that's not a desert, then it does not get adjusted based on locale. And otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions that sometimes come up when it comes to the actual financial logistics. One other point, if there are no questions, is that we do also reimburse the fellows to attend our two section meetings. So you'll be invited to attend our mid-year meeting that is typically January or February, and our May meeting, which is typically May. And those will be reimbursed from a separate pool of funds that you'll be invited to attend those two meetings, 2 or 3 days, depending on your schedule.
What's really cool about that, if I can interrupt you for a minute, Ty, is that when at the meetings, you will generally have an opportunity to speak as well. So it's not just show up and sit in the audience, but it's really, work on becoming active in the American Bar Association tax section, so that you have an opportunity to pay it forward, to learn, to make a substantive presentation, and to talk about what you've been doing, what's interesting to you substantively, and also to think about how you will become involved in the tax section once your fellowship ends.
It's also a great place to make friends.
Yes,
It's
and
nice
and find
to
potential employers.
A lot of people refer to our conferences as family reunions. So it's nice to see folks from all over the country, and also, the LATC Grantee Conference, which happens in December, is another great opportunity for that. But it doesn't include lawyers from private practice, so it's nice to have a mix of different types of people that come to our meetings. And the tax section takes public service and pro bono work really seriously. So that's been one of the joys of my job, honestly. So you would encounter that as well. So it's really one of a huge perk of this fellowship, I think, is having the access to those meetings and to that network of people. Um, Circling back on a couple other items, if you are a potential host organization and you would like a fellow and you think that your host organization could provide access in a place where there really isn't enough access to tax services, meaning that you could work with a fellow to meet the goals of this program, then please feel free to contact me to brainstorm how to find someone. But you probably know your local area more than I do. RG is a perfect example, as he was a private attorney who was doing pro bono work for his host organization. He'll tell you more about that later. Leslie had previously worked there and was returning to a job she had before. That's not always an option, of course. Sometimes you're just looking for someone. So I'm happy to pull a list of members in your area, especially if you live somewhere rural. It's not going to be that many people, so that might be a good way to reach out. Other options are going through your local bar association or local law schools and looking at their alumni networks. If you are not already a part of our listserv, I would recommend joining. You can join for free. You don't have to be a member of the ABA tax section. Most of our committees you do, but for the pro bono and tax clinics committee, you can join the listserv by creating a My ABA profile and clicking the box for pro bono and tax clinics. And you can use that list as a place to source either fellows or host organizations. So you can say, hey, I'm really interested in the Tax Analyst Fellowship. I'm looking for a host or I'm looking for a fellow. Lisa's already done that. And that is one way of doing it. I also sometimes hear from host organizations or fellows that are looking for matches, and I'm happy to try to help with that to the extent that I can help at least brainstorm places to find people. Obviously, someone who's already on your pro bono panel is the ideal candidate because you already know them, but that's not always the
And
case.
they know you, and they know
Right.
you, and the kind of work, and they feel comfortable with the kind of work that you do.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if you're an experienced tax lawyer and you are interested in to get into getting into LATC work, and there isn't a local LATC near you, that is a really good fit for this program, but makes it hard to find a host organization. So, would be happy to talk to you about that, because at that point, you're probably going to a legal services or your local university or some such thing and saying, hey, would you like to have an LATC? And that's pretty daunting. It takes the right person with the right level of independence and confidence to do that, but it is possible, and we'd be happy to. Susan and I would be happy to talk you through that process, what that would look like, and it could be that the first year of your project is just setting the LATC up, and then the second year is getting it going, and trying to fund yourself to continue, perhaps.
And you can look at there's an IRS publication 4134, and that publication lists all of the LITCs in the country. And if you look at that, you can see the states that have LITCs, but you can also see states that don't.
Right.
And you can also see which parts of states have LITCs and which parts of states don't. So that's another way to sort of have a bird's eye view of what might be available, where the LITC deserts are in the country.
And one other example of a really good, I would say, set of facts or situation for a tax analyst fellow would be finding an LATC where that is going strong, but the person who sort of holds the whole thing together may be retiring soon or may need to leave. That is a really good role for a tax analyst fellow, because perhaps they could overlap for a year. And then it's sort of like succession planning. The tax analyst fellowship is a great succession plan, essentially, because if your current LATC isn't able to fund someone that might take over after you, and you really like to pass on that knowledge to someone new, it can be a really good way to provide that funding gap to allow for that. So I do know of a couple clinic directors that are retiring in the near future. I'm happy to, connect you with them if that's something that would be of interest. I can list Texas and New York as some of those places.
And it would be, there are both academic LITCs and independent standalone nonprofit LITCs and LITCs associated with legal services programs. So there is sort of a menu of offerings where you could look to fill in.
Yeah, for the academic, for either option, actually, we would be looking but for the fellowship funding, this position would not be available. So, if you're applying somewhere, or if your host organization is a university that has just umpteenth fellowship opportunities and they don't really need it, it's going to be a harder sell. Whereas we have folks that we've placed at universities who have said, our university is cutting funding for everything. There's no possible way to fund a fellowship um, at this academic LATC without this funding. Um, or again, if it's succession planning. I think that covers how, like, sort of the matchmaking element. Um, let's see, I think that covers most of what we wanted to talk about. And I will now hand it over to Leslie and RG to talk about their experiences. And then we'll take questions after that. So if folks have questions, you can stick them in the chat or you can wait till after Leslie and RG speak. Leslie, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. It's good seeing everyone. I missed you at the May ABA meeting. But yeah, it's good being here. I guess what I can share is I had some experience with LITCs back in the early days, beginning in the year 2000, I think, and then I left and went to law school, and then I was in private practice for some time. But I still volunteered for DNA legal services, so I had some. They were familiar with me and I was familiar with them. And then at one point in 2023, I decided to leave my private practice and I was trying to figure out what to do. And, it was just really, I feel like the stars were just all aligned perfectly for me at that time. I didn't feel like that when I gave my notice to my partners and didn't know what I was going to do. But then I thought, oh, I think I'll reach out to DNA and see, if they have anything there I can do. And then I reached out to Nina Olson at the Center for Taxpayer Rights because I knew her from years, prior years. And I came to find out that DNA no longer had an LITC clinic. They had given it up maybe 5 years before, and that Northern Arizona was an area where, the LITC grant program and other people were looking to have an LITC. That's really what I wanted to do. I really had to knock on the doors of my sponsoring organization because the new administration didn't know me at all. But fortunately, some workers who I knew back in 20 years prior were still there in the offices, mostly on the reservation offices, and they were very supportive of me doing this. So as it turned out, I really feel like, and I feel like this is being an ABA, the tax analyst fellow, was really the most exciting part in my career. And I'm not, over exaggerating that, but I also feel like, that term, it takes a village, was so true for me because I really needed DNA to get on board. That took a while. I had to actually take a job first as a managing attorney in their Chinle office before we got the LITC grant. So I was traveling, quite a bit, but that worked out. And then Nina told me about the ABA fellowship. I didn't know about it at all. And then I met Meg and, and then I applied and, with the support of DNA, which was so important, with the support of the ABA and the Center for Taxpayer Rights. So I really think for anyone, considering applying for this fellowship, which is a great opportunity to do something that you really feel needs to be done, and to get the support of tax analysts and the ABA to do it. It's really important that you have a supporting organization that really let you do your thing and support you in that way. And the ABA was great, but mine started a little later than I think tax analysts or the ABA would have liked, just a couple months later. But they were very flexible with that, and I truly appreciate that. Yeah, and we did, I'm still here. My organization, sponsoring organization, has kept me on so far. Fingers crossed. We'll see. And another great thing for our organization in my time as a fellow was a year into it. The opportunity came up to have someone, a newly graduated law student out of the Arizona State University Indian Law Program, apply for the Brunswick Fellow, and now Chelsea Stosi works with me here at DNA. So like I said, it couldn't have been. I felt like a child waking up on Christmas morning, getting everything she wanted, and I still feel that way. I love what we're doing. We've built the program up. Now we're looking around. Well, what are we going to do about all these cases? And we haven't turned down, except for if it was a conflict or for other reasons, we really haven't turned down any new LITC clients, and we continue to build it. We continue to do outreach. It's been a great experience. I've gotten to do a lot of things. And yes, having Laura Lauricchio come out to the reservation and spend 3 days with another person from Tax Analysts. She's the investigative journalist, and just being able to introduce her to people and show her, what we're dealing with, and then help her with the writing of that story. Really, I didn't help at all. But anyway, I gave her access and I answered questions. And yeah, it was a great opportunity. I don't know if there's anything else. Our program was to start up an LITC at DNA. We've started it up. We've also worked with United Way in Tucson to expand VITA programs and sites on the reservation. And that's a project we continue to do, but it's getting somewhere finally. And it's been important. The ABA conferences have just been really, an important part of all this, going and having the community and having the support and having the weekly strategy meetings and having the listserv that the ABA provides. All of those things, I've never, in my years as a lawyer, I've never had such great collaboration. So I think that's also a really important thing, is the community that's built as part of the fellowship. I think my 5 minutes is up. I probably went over.
No, you're good. That was great. And I mean, Leslie and probably RG too are really the ideal candidates. So, I'll talk a little bit when they're done about expectations around your application. But Leslie was the perfect first tax analyst fellow. This is a young fellowship, she was the first one. All right, RG.
Yeah. Thanks. I like Leslie, my experience in this fellowship has just been a great experience, and it's been different, I think, from the way Leslie has done her fellowship, but I think that's kind of the point. They're not all going to be the same. Career-wise, the way that I got to my fellowship is a kind of a windy path. I started out my career at a law school at a Big Four accounting firm in Minneapolis. And I was there for a few years, and then I moved on to an international law firm, the tax practice at an international law firm in St. Louis. So I did a lot of transactional tax work, and I did a fair amount of compliance work for like corporate returns and high wealth individuals. And it's very different from the kind of work I do now, but it did at least get me started in the world of tax. And my wife and I moved to rural Arkansas, which is where I am from. And I ran a family business for a while, but I really missed tax practice. And during that time, I got connected with Legal Aid of Arkansas's LITC clinic, which is an excellent LITC. And I did a lot of volunteer work, or a fair amount of volunteer work for them. And I got to know the LITC director and Legal Aid of Arkansas in general. And what I learned at that time was just how important it is to provide tax services to these underserved communities. And that is particularly so in rural communities, like in northern Arkansas. And so that was the beginning of what turned into my fellowship is, and in a nutshell, my fellowship, it leverages off of an existing LITC at Legal Aid of Arkansas to extend and provide tax services to the rural communities, especially in northern Arkansas. And it's not all that. I mean, there's some parts of it where I'm just helping the LITC to manage its ordinary tax caseload. And also, I'm there to provide some amount of continuity for the LITC so that LITC services can be performed not just by the director, but by me as well. And so the organization doesn't depend on just this one person. So that's in a nutshell, that's my fellowship. The benefits that I've really experience, I think this has the potential to be a really great career transition. Ideally, what you want to do is take the knowledge and skills that you've learned in tax practice already and see if you can't use those to create something new and unique in the tax world of public service tax practice. And even though the fellowship itself is just 2 years, if you plan it well and you execute it well, it really does have the ability to turn into an ongoing career for you. And so I really think that what has been critical to for my success in the fellowship and in the future is really leveraging off of the experience and staying connected with the ABA tax section. The ABA tax section, I can tell this fellowship is near and dear to their heart, and they want to see you succeed in your fellowship and after. And that is something that you definitely want to take advantage of when you do it. I would say call them when you have issues or when you have ideas. Definitely attend these tax conferences. They are free to you. It's great networking. I myself, I'm not. I'm kind of an introverted person, but every single one of these conferences that I've been to and that I've networked with people at, I have not regretted it at all. It's been a great experience. Just a few other observations. I would say that you are, as Susan and Meg had mentioned earlier, you are going to be an employee of whatever host organization you're at, and that is important to keep in mind. You need to know your organization. You need to know how you're going to fit into it. You need to know that you're an employee of it, but you also need to know where the money is coming from to pay or to fund that employment. And so you always need to keep in mind of making sure that the services that you're providing to your host organization are aligned with what your fellowship asks. And I've been very lucky in that sense, and that everything that I have done in Legal Aid of Arkansas has been consistent with my fellowship, and that's a testament to the host organization of really wanting the fellowship to do well and believing in it as well. And so, the final point I'll make is that I have been pleasantly surprised that the world of public service tax law, particularly the LITCs, it's a very close-knit community. It is very collegial, and not all areas of practice in law are like that. And I'm certainly not knocking the career path I had before in the world of transactional tax, but it's a friendlier group, and that has been great.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. And both of them are, I'm sure I'm now offering things up without asking them first, but I'm sure RG and Leslie are both willing to speak with, I got a thumbs up. So both willing to speak with potential fellows. I'm happy to pass you on to them. If you'd like to talk to them more about their experience or how they pulled their fellowship together or how it helped their career, what have you. Um, as I said when I spoke with a potential candidate earlier this week, if you don't have exactly 5 years of experience, which both of these folks easily did, um, don't, still, I would still, you could still apply. I would still consider it because we're really looking at the whole package. We would like 5 years of experience. We would like someone who has a background in tax law. If you have 5 years of experience that maybe isn't in tax law, but you feel like, you have, we would want you to have a plan for how you're going to pick it up. Like, all right, do you have a supervisor? Do you have a mentor? How are you going to pick up the tax law? And if you do have a tax law background, but it's less than 5 years, how are you going to make sure that if you get a tricky case or what's going on, who's going to help you? And the tax section is always here to help you with that, but we would expect that you had someone locally, someone sort of built into the fellowship application that would help you. If you have more experience, like Leslie has been practicing in this area for a very long time, we aren't as concerned about that. We figure you can probably figure it out or find, and we'll give you someone to call for a particularly sticky situation. Same thing with the host organization. We want the host organization to be a strong organization that's not going to go under, that's not going to change their mind about you having an LATC. Just kidding, we don't want this. Somewhere that seems like they are genuinely interested in hosting a fellow or starting an LATC or what have you. If it is in a location, we just our first year tax analyst fellow is in a location that is not an LITC desert, but she found a way to meet the requirements of the fellowship anyway by traveling regularly to Montana, where we really have needed services for a long time in the LITC world. So we're willing, and in some of that just depends. If we get a Leslie or RG in our group this year, chances are we're probably going to pick them, right? They meet all the goals of the fellowship. They have the 5 years of experience. They have a really good project or a really good location that they want to be. But if we don't, we might be much more willing to be flexible. So you just don't know what you're up against until you apply. So I would encourage you to apply. Be be clear on the things that you're missing, like if your experience isn't there or if you know that your location isn't exactly perfect, just explain why you think you'd be a good fit anyway when you do the application and then also when you do the interview. Try to think through how you can make your location, even if it's not in an LITC desert type area, how can you use this 2 years to expand services and really focus on that in your application? Or, like I said before, if your experience is the issue, then how do you feel like you'll be confident in your practice of tax law? Not committing malpractice and all of that. Yeah, one of our goals, in your time as a fellow. And just make sure you explain that to us so we can understand. So I encourage you to apply if you're interested.
One of the issues one of the issues that's come up in connection with other fellowships is whether the fellowship is transferable, either by the fellow or the host organization. And the answer to that is no. It's a package deal. It's you plus the host organization. It's not you exclusive of the host organization. You can't pick yourself up and move from, I'm going to pick on RG, from Arkansas to Washington State and seek a host organization there mid fellowship. So we look to the whole package and both your commitment and the host organization's commitment to the full 2-year project.
Yeah, and same the other way around. If you're a host organization looking for a fellow, make sure you pick someone that you really want to work with and you think would be an asset to the tax community long term. And all of that. And then one more thing, we get a lot of folks that look at this one or the Brunswick Fellowship and maybe it would be a better fit for the other one. So I'll go over really quick for the Christine Brunswick Fellowship. The similarities to this one are that it's a 2-year fellowship. The finances run exactly the same as Ty said before. The only difference is we also cover a portion of the student loans because people are closer to their law student loans. And as a result, the salary is slightly lower because we also do cover those loans. But it also covers a portion of benefits and things like that. for that fellowship, we're looking for someone that's, like I said, a recent graduate. So that can mean you're a 3L when you're applying. It can mean that you're doing a clerkship when you're applying. It can mean you're finishing an LLM. It can mean you practiced for, maybe a couple of years, something like that. So there is a little bit of overlap in the practice for a couple of years part. But we don't have a specific definition of like what is recent, but 20 years is not recent. It's sort of like when you see it.
Yeah, but I was going to
Um,
say, Meg, as the experience of Leslie shows, it could be that you started in an LITC as a non-attorney, and then, 2 decades later, you return as an attorney. And so even though Leslie may not have practiced tax law for 5 years, she still had the experience. And so, that was really important to informing her application.
yes, but going back to the Brunswick one, for that one, you don't need to have legal experience. You can be a brand new lawyer. The committee does look for people who have taken tax classes in law school, or, our strongest applicants are always folks who have participated in an LATC in law school or volunteered over the summer. We do have a summer program as well, which is a nice feeder to the Brunswick Fellowship. We do usually, not always, usually we find 2 people, so there's a little bit more room there for getting a position. And for that one, we don't care as much about reaching people that haven't been reached. I mean, we do consider that if we have applicants who are in places, for example, Leslie's Brunswick candidate, we knew it was just her out there. So that was definitely something that we considered. But we've done a couple in Minneapolis or Philly or whatever recently, apply again anyway. It's okay. We really want the goals for that program are to create tax lawyers who have 2 years of tax law experience being tax lawyers under the supervision and guidance of a good tax lawyer, so that we can grow the field. And then the other goal, and get them excited about public interest tax. And then the other goal is to fill some sort of knowledge gap in the general area, or do some sort of outreach, or do some sort of project. We will do an info session for that project, for that program, in August. Application period should open in early September, late August. The applications will be due in November, and then we do the interviews in December, January. We make offers in January, and that would be for the next year. So, if you have something to fill your time for the next year, and you're thinking about beyond that, this would be a good time to think about the Brunswick Fellowship. So we'll be looking for that. I would recommend, again, if you're a potential candidate and you're thinking about either of these fellowships, I would recommend that you join the listserv. A lot of job opportunities go through that listserv. It's a really good resource. And in addition, we will put the application for that program and the information session for that program. All of that will be on the listserv as well. So join the listserv, so you can get updates on all sorts of job openings in the public interest world. All right, we got two
And
more
also learn
minutes.
the
I'm sorry.
issues
And
and
also learn
also
the
get a
issues. Oh yeah,
sense of
more
the
importantly,
issues facing
yes,
this community.
yes, 90% of the emails that go through there are about really, really interesting issues that come up in the context of working with taxpayers. So yes, it's the knowledge base is the number one thing. Great, thank you, Susan. Good point. Okay, we've got one more minute. Are there any questions from anyone here? And if you're listening to the recording, feel free to shoot me any questions that you have. Also, I'm happy if you have like really specific questions to yourself and you don't want to share them in this format. Again, I'm happy to set up. I've got several calls set up in the next 2 weeks with folks that wanted to get more information. So I'm happy to do that. All right. Well, thank you for joining us either live or in the recorded version. And we look forward to reviewing applications.
Thank you all. Good seeing you.
Take care.
Thank you.